Welcome back, everybody, to this Tableau for FIRST Robotics video course presented by FRC Team 2834. Today we are going to talk about calculated fields. So we've already learned about the four different types of advanced charts and managing data on a graphical level, manipulating all of our data to get different looking graphs. Now we're going to work on managing our data on a numerical level. And that's going to include things like calculated fields, and in the next video we're going to go over discrete and continuous data, which will lead us into trend lines. So let's get started. Alright, so here we are in Tableau, and I am going to make a new sheet, and I'm going to rename it Calculated Fields. Oops. Okay. So what is a calculated field? A calculated field is a way to take multiple pills, such as multiple measures, and combine them in an equation form to get an output like a function. So say I wanted to get the total auto power cell scoring of a team. What I would do is I would add auto inner port, auto low port, and auto outer port together. Now I can do that, as we learned, using a stacked bar chart where each color is each of these measures, but stacked on top of each other I get the total. But I can do what's called a calculated field to add these together and get a custom pill, and that would be equal to the total of these three pills. So let's do that. We're going to go to Analysis and Create Calculated Field. And we get to name our field here, and this is what the name of the pill is going to be. So I'm going to call this Total Auto Power Cells. Total Auto Power Cells. And we're going to set that equal to auto inner port. So we can start typing. We get this autofill stuff here, and you hit tab and it'll enter it. And then we're going to hit plus, and we, instead of typing, can also drag things from our pill tree, and then hit plus, and then auto low port, and hit plus. So now I've got exactly what I want my calculated field to be. It's going to be the total power cells that I score in auto, which is equal to the auto inner port scoring plus the auto outer port scoring plus the auto low port scoring. And it says here this calculation is valid. If I had an error, like an extra plus sign, it would say this calculation contains errors, and it'll give you a reason why. So once it says calculation is valid, I'm going to hit OK. And right down here, we get our new pill called Total Auto PC. And we know it's a calculated field and a custom-made one because instead of this octothorpe or hashtag sign, we have that, but it has a little equal sign to the left of it. So we know it's a calculated field. So let's use that on our graph. I'm going to drag team number into columns, and I'm going to drag total auto power cells into rows, and there we go. And compared to our chart with these three individually in a stacked bar chart, this is the exact same total, except our bars aren't divided. We summed them all together. Now, what would happen if instead of saying the sum total power cell points across all a team's matches, if instead we wanted to get the average? So as we discussed before, taking this average is not taking the average of each individual piece. What it's actually doing is summing up each of these three pieces for each match and taking the average of each of those three matches. So for example, let's say in match number 1, this team scored 3 in the low, 0 in the inner, and 0 in the outer, and match number 2, they scored 5 in the outer, 0 in the low, 0 in the inner. Their average between the two matches would be 4 for total power cells scored. And similarly, we can look at other things like median. Count is just the amount of matches that you're getting data from. So unless you want to see how many matches a team has played, you don't really need to look at that. So we're just going to go back to sum. So we've created our first calculated field. But there are a lot of other things that we can do with calculated fields. So I'm going to go to Analysis, and I'm going to create a second calculated field. And we are going to call this one Teleop Score. actually we're going to call it teleop power cell score. So if you're familiar with Excel at all, or Google Sheets, or any type of spreadsheet editor, you're allowed to make these functions where you can add certain cells together, you can multiply them by numbers, you can divide them, you can find averages, and if we go over to the right here, we have all of these different functions in this little menu that I can minimize with this arrow. And we have all these functions that we can use in our calculated field equations. And it follows a syntax very similar to that of Excel or Google Sheets. So for teleop PC score, what I want is the total point value that a team got in teleop from scoring power cells. So what's that going to be for this game? Well, it's going to be our teleop low port, and how much are teleop low ports worth? 1 point. So we could say times 1, but that's not going to do anything, so we're just going to put teleop low port plus teleop outer port. Teleop outer ports are worth 2 points, so we're going to say times 2, and then plus, and then we're going to say teleop inner port. Teleop inner ports are worth 3 points, so we're going to say times 3. And going back to your 6th or 7th grade math class, this does follow PEMDAS. We don't need parentheses here because it'll take the multiplication before the addition. And this calculation is valid, so we're going to hit OK. So now let's drag this out, and let's instead bring up total PC score. There we go. Now we have the score that our teams got during teleop from scoring power cells. Okay, so that's just about everything we can talk about with calculated fields. There's so many more things you can do, but there are already a ton of resources out there to help you create your calculated fields. I would encourage you to practice with equation making on Excel or Google Sheets because the syntax that those programs follow is very similar to the calculated field editor in Tableau, and it's going to make it very easy for you to make really advanced calculated fields. And you can also start thinking about some interesting calculations besides just adding up point values or scoring. Think about maybe you want only the scoring that a team got, but you only wanted to display that scoring in matches where that team actually hung. So kind of an if statement there, and if statements are supported by Tableau and calculated fields. So there are a lot of different things you can do with calculated fields. I encourage you to go do some independent research on that. There are plenty of resources out there to get you going with calculated fields. All right, next time we're going to talk about trend lines and discrete and continuous data.